they try to change their interpret. Now that's severance. Go to the limits debate. The way that they interpret the topic is never the way that the way it's put in practice. Policy teams are always changing the bounds of the topic, always trying to explode limits. They trigger their own impacts through whatever TVA they're going to read. Now limits are already exploded. They don't want not one more reason they have uniquely exposed limits. Rest plus one soft limits. And the voting negative does not endorse the utopian the ideal of limits and never occur in practice, which leads to resounding amount of policy debaters go to the ground debate. Structuralism fuck their ground. Their conflation of ordering straightation to the desire for ground is not a mutual root. They engender modes of political thinking that say the lack of knowledge of which creates failure to liberalism, make ignores that systems are not abstract, but the abstract that structurally exist in all social and political institutions are desire massive machines that we are all smaller cogs of. Their ground is that they should structurally engage in the complex web of relationships and determine political realities. They can read bulk data collection, good surveillance, good terror, disad, host of critical arguments, reciting our context by the Deleuzian politics of identity politics, critiques of Deleuze in general, which solve their offense and all their exclusion inevitable claims are going to make in the block prove the turns their ground claims on Twitch side debate, negation saying everything that you disagree with should be should be negative argument, traps all of the rights of epistemology and permanent negation, which is exactly what we're critiquing. If we can read it on the negative, you should have been prepared for it on the affirmative. Now, the next is testing intelligibility. This at the point of the affirmative to refuse a call to order submitting to the resolutional testing opens up co-option and neoliberal commodification like the TVA that they're going to read, then give you a bright line for how much testing is actually needing and non-unique. Every single argument they made an off case except framework testing as and they can give policy education and other routes on clash epistemology. Just out all of our criticism of politics, you should disregard their clash arguments. Their advocacy for deep and nuanced data in the context of resolution is good for development of micropolitical methods which reify opposite oppression because they only operate with a terrain of power that is demarcated in events. Instead, pedagogical and performances like the affirmative have effective and epistemic encounters with the ideas that undo disciplinary structures of power in relationship to old ideas and structures that are exactly what got us here in the first place. We don't need to invest deeper into the strategy, and debate is more than just a game. Their examples only prove competitive aspects, but debate is a form that discussion that can't happen anywhere else. It is a place in which we can create better subject formation to pedagogical investment. We should shape through molecular analysis. Now on fairness. Fairness is worthless. First, math game just said, what value does procedural fairness have in a world where debate is already structurally unfair? Feeling good about having fair debates in their safe bubble. They demand procedural fair world while the world burns around them. And second is ordering this. Faith in the value of fairness is a result of normalization of ideology and discipline that are made order, neat, and balance and comfortability, entrenched in school violence and non-conformity. The affirmative rupture that conforms and draws attention to typically invisible techniques of encodification. Third, their desire for fairness is infinitely regressive. Fairness is not an impact, only internal link to education. Hard debates are good debates. Force quick thinking and innovation. Internal link turns education. Go to education pedagogy. This at the affirmative regulates the kind of knowledge to produce the proliferation of motivated heroes to the resistance of their ideology. Recovery can circulate freely. Refuse the falsehood of academic participation that to use this space to form new subjectivities to resist. No warrant for why topic education is better than critical knowledge or why accumulation of knowledge is desirable in the first place. And go to the K. First is the framing issue. Power now operates through forcing bodies to self-regulate. The resolution of calls for recovery from the Trump presidency is an example of neoliberal management in academic spaces that enables the marking of brokenness to be reconciled under the veil of liberalism while only continue to be co-opted by power. The only way to reconcile that violence without recreating the same violence is to refuse and foster methods of constructive resistance and navigation of neoliberalism. Even if their theory can explain certain violences without a well-developed methodology, they'll never be able to avoid the false hope impacts of the 1AC. If we win our theory of power, we should win the perm, which they have conceded. Perm do both complicity, dissent. They uniquely participate in structure with the structure of proliferation of libidinal violence. All itself results in massive school violence. We think that those violences can be subverted and reshaped through different subjectivities and debate. The affirmative is the only way to be able to set those to recreate those subjectivities and use refusal to be able to navigate neoliberalism and the impacts that they identify in the K in a constructive way for marginalized communities that are constantly have violence committed against their bodies. Now the next is that we only have to win a marginal risk that the F can solve the impact, so be able to win this debate because they've conceded our theory of power coming out of the 1NC. Now they are basically saying the school as it is good and shouldn't change. One, that double turns their action of a framework that is called for changing political environments by restricting chump. Second of all, this validates and obscures massive structural violence against marginalized communities. Put a structural violence dissent on this. They are okay with all anti-black violence, all settler colonialist violence, all ableist violence, all queer violence, normativity, and not changing. that is exactly what we think is bad in the way that we understand school violence, because that is our micro-fascism impact that they only read by standing in the school and not actually doing anything to be able to reshape our subjectivities and navigate these violences in a constructive way, which is what the PERM would do. They are allowing all these violence to continue to be proliferated against these against marginalized communities and bodies. Now, we're going to impact turn all their, we're impact turning all their links, but they say that we they say that we created. Yeah, actually, fuck that. We solve capitalism, performative conduct. This is Gaming 17. Enforcement self-responsibility for responding to the neoliberal lens of the tone that actually has to seek the surveillance state of the recipient accounts and program to blaming the counter conduct those who live in the last, the marginalized side, capable of creating subjectivity, the way that we connect ourselves to the behavior of the Roman neoliberal forms of governance and non-compliance. And yes, we are anti-normative. We think that we should fuck normativity in the way that we understand it in this world, because it only recreates massive violence and false hope for marginalized populations. We think the very criticism that they create to try and stay in the school only recreates all right.
Correct. Why do you think that the alternative is not radical?
Your alt?
Yeah.
Because you're saying we should just like let shit happen. Like we're like at least individuals should like navigate neoliberalism in a constructive way. You're just like, hey, let's just like sit and like let shit happen and like let people like die socially on massive.
Field, I will do more work on it later. But
Well, that's
okay.
exciting.
Cool. Okay. The false hope, is that just like reformism bad?
False hope. I mean, it's about the way in which, like, literally, like, how liberalism shapes the way that we understand change and the way that we try to desire a recovery from certain political instances only recreates the violences that we were trying to recover.
Why is the resolution explicitly focused on Trump? It just says the powers of the presidency.
Well,
Why
okay, it's silly to
about
say
Trump?
that the Trump presidency and the radicalness of Trump is not the reason that not the reason that we didn't have, or that we had this resolution. That's absolutely ridiculous. I think we all in this room know that everybody in the debate community hates Trump and wants to be able to try and figure out ways of like refusing Trump because we're we're a bunch of leftists, but you know, in all reality, that shit's never going to actually spill out of the room, and we think recreating that only creates false hope within academic spaces that we think is bad.
Cool. Let's see.
So, why is you being anti-normative an answer to the critique?
Yeah, so we are literally impact turning the idea of normativity because first of all, we think in the way that subject formations happen now, there's no such thing as normativity and there'll always be broken bodies that are identified by neoliberalism.
So
we think we should navigate those things to be able to create the most constructive environment for people of otherized epistemologies.
How do you refuse, like, politics or normative, or be anti-normative?
We say the very performance of the 1AC and the fact that you read framework to say that we have to be normative is necessarily a move to like non-normativity within debate spaces. We also think we academically foster a thought project that allows us to refuse certain forms of neoliberal commodification that happens in academic spaces.
Okay. Let's see. What else? What was the argument you made right after you said the alt obscures violence? I think I missed it.
I said that we're going to impact turn every one of your links.
Oh, okay, that was it. Okay. Then I didn't miss anything. Good stuff. Okay.
Why is the Halberstam evidence saying we should engage in politics not mean Halberstam thinks we should engage in politics?
Halberstam specifically says that we should create a politic of refusal to be able to navigate neoliberalism in our own way. You should really read like their books.
Okay.
take this for you so that you have the thing of it, yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah. I just saved it. Hopefully it gets updated. Speech checks. Okay, I can send it to you. Send it to you later.
Okay, 6:51.
Sorry, used or remaining?
Remaining. Orders just to. No, there's no cards either.
Okay.
That's like a short arm view, I guess. Is anybody not ready?
This debate is about competing visions of what debate should look like, not whether the act is good or bad. The ballot only indicates a quality of debating while casting ultimate judgments on the arguments of debaters themselves. Our interpretation does not make any style, type of evidence, or assumption about the role of the judge, only that the resolution determines what arguments justify an affirmative ballot. They need a debate keyword in order to win the ballot, otherwise speech or parliamentary debate solves our offerings. If the impact is it causes saturation within debate states, so we could be devoting our strategies to other things besides the affirmative. And topicality is a procedural question, so you shouldn't weigh any of their offense. Our interpretation is that the affirmative must defend the hypothetical enactment of a topical plan. That means a statutory or judicial restriction on executive authority afforded by one of the topic areas. Statutory refers to Congress, judicial refers to courts. That's the GPO and topic. And Thomas evidence, their first argument about the framing question doesn't prove any of their solvency arguments, because topicality is simply recognizing what grounds that the affirmative should be awarded and how it should be defined by the resolution. It talks about how what arguments justify an affirmative ballot. It doesn't seek to survey any of them. It's only asking that the affirmative attach a topical plan text to their affirmative. They can still talk about any of the impacts that they want to, only that the topical plan, only that attaching a plan text allows us to gain all of our offense and allows us to effectively engage with the affirmative. I'll do the violation here. The affirmative doesn't defend statutory and/or judicial restrictions, which means we lose access to things like our basis or the politics side. We also lose out on the sort of mechanism debates. Mechanism debates are key to breaking down the complexity of the government in order to impose it. One great example is the circumvention debate that we can have on surveillance. How does the government feel in surveillance once it's taken away? If we take away one form of surveillance, how does it feel into others? All of those things are necessary questions that the affirmative doesn't answer, or that we don't get to test with the affirmative. The affirmative also doesn't defend a specific method in order to decrease the affirmative doesn't defend a specific method to decrease executive power. It's only left up to interpretation. It wasn't clear for the one you see, but that completely explodes limits because there's numerous methods which could be used in order to break down the surveillance. Specific decreases are good because it allows us to not only get the knowledge but also interact with that sort of the mechanisms that exist in the first place. Their counter-interpretation doesn't. It's wholly unpredictable because even if they have outline surveillance, there's two arguments. First of all, their method wasn't predictable from the start. How can we be able to predict that their specific decrease in executive power was a predictable form because it isn't guarded in any sort of literature. Also doesn't call for a specific form of action simply by a refusal. There are numerous ways to refuse something based on different grounds. They've chosen the neoliberal path, but one could easily imagine how they could refuse the surveillance on the grounds of different perspectives. All of the other examples of what we could have done are also reasons why the affirmative completely explodes minutes. But the second argument is that they completely decrease the entirety of surveillance. That isn't what the resolution is talking about. Bulk incidental collection, which is key, which completely justifies exploding limits based on the different types of surveillance that the affirmative justify only. We were prepared to talk about bulk incidental collection that happens in the United States. Our interpretation does exclude KVK debate because, well, impact turn. It causes a race to the margins where other teams will constantly be finding new literature in order to run away from any sort of strategy. But also there's a solution distortion to set the competitive incentives of debate and warp any sort of advocacy skills, time limits and permutations, all guaranteed that leads to another eternal the race to the margins. Our interpretation